Hey everybody, and welcome to Rapid's Ramblings, podcast 363. This time I don't have too much to say. I've gotten to level 35 in New World, which is only 10 levels further than I did in beta. I have played, I would guess, around 75 hours, and in beta I played about 50, so I haven't seen and done a whole lot more than I did in beta. But I do have some new thoughts. So hopefully you'll enjoy the show. As I said in the open, a lot of my thoughts are pretty much the same as I had in beta. So I would recommend, if you haven't heard my, one or two ramblings about New World in the previous podcasts, you might want to rewind and listen to those before you listen to this one. For the new thoughts, the first new thought I have, which I guess isn't really a new thought, but it is that playing a level-based game feels odd. I think it's probably been about 7 years since I've played a level-based MMO. Most of them now are moving to either fully scaling or scaling in a way where you have a level, but things do still scale to you. So it's weird going back to one that is completely level-based. You can very easily run into quests which are higher level than you are, which some you can do easily, some not so easily, and some will just be way too hard. This can make things either difficult to extremely frustrating. Like one I had was to kill some bears, which you wouldn't think bears are too tough, but in New World being sort of historically colonial time based, it has things like bears which are super tough. And I died probably 3 or 4 times before I said, you know what, I'm going to give up and come back and do this quest later in a few levels when I'm, higher level, and then it won't be as difficult. So that's kind of my recommendation for that. If you do run into quests that are too high or just simply too frustrating, just back off, try and shake yourself off, relax a little bit. And then, sort of go back to the area you've been in, or maybe even try a different area and look for quests that would be easier, or do town board quests, which are almost always crafting based or gathering based. Very rarely is it like a go here and kill this thing that is super hard for you to kill. Or you can do faction quests, which are almost always pretty much balanced to that area that you're getting the quest from. And then, like I said, come back and do the ones that were too hard later on. There's almost always plenty of stuff to do to sort of avoid the hard quests if it's too hard and frustrating you. I previously had done the first dungeon during the betas about 6 times. Since launch, I have also done it 6 times-ish, I think. I've done the second dungeon also, I think, about 6 times. And the dungeons are pretty fun, but it really depends on the group you are with, which I suppose is kind of the case for any MMO. Some try and rush through the dungeon really super fast, and others fight cautiously, and for me I have a much better time when we're fighting cautiously and carefully and not just rushing and bashing our heads into it. Because those runs where you don't have a tank and they're not taunting properly, or the DPS is rushing ahead and pulling everything and people are dying repeatedly, those just aren't fun for me. Some people are like, oh, it's just game, bro, and they don't care about repeatedly dying and paying the repair costs and losing stuff, but I do. So it's not the best if you don't find people sort of like interest. In addition to dungeons, there are open world areas which are called elite areas, and these are areas that have tough guys that are sort of on dungeon level in difficulty. Sometimes they have some mini bosses. Usually they have pretty good loot worth going and getting, but it really varies since it's an open area as to how many people will be there, and thus how easy or difficult it is. If you go in and almost nobody's there, like I did that this morning, I thought I'd go in and just follow some people through it, but there was nobody there. That's just gonna wreck you if you try and get in. And other times it's gonna be like super overly busy, and it's not gonna be very fun, and you're not gonna get very much done, and it's just gonna be completely chaotic. But those are some open areas you can go with a group, or you can go solo, or you can go with a couple groups. It's all varying. It's not like a dungeon where it's sort of designed around a set number of people. I can see why some people would get bored or not be interested in the game, though. A lot of the elements are just good. Like the crafting is good, the dungeons are good, the combat is good. But the fact that everything is good and nothing is like, well, this is really terrible, but this other thing is like really amazing, kind of sets it on a much better starting point than pretty much all the other MMOs I've played. Most of the other MMOs did some things good, some things bad, some things terrible. But here with New World, I would say everything is good. And so since it's all good, it kind of adds up to be sort of more than the sum of its parts. I'm always having fun and I'm always interested in stuff. I am never bored. Again, I could see how some people would find it boring if, they're just doing stuff and it's kind of good all the time. But I always, challenge myself by going and doing harder areas than my level, should be doing. Or I do an interesting looking quest. Or I do a dungeon and I look for some loot. So I always find something good and interesting to do. And I am, very happy to wait for the future for them to polish things, add more stuff, and for it to, eventually become, hopefully, truly great, ideally. But, at least add more good and even better stuff, down the line. I would say there is a problem with the small server size, which I was very hesitant about ever from the start. I don't know why they would go with something with such small server sizes. I do get it, because originally it was based around PvP, and there are just a handful of territories, and so people are supposed to get, in guilds and take over the territories, and then have wars to, my company wants to take over this territory and take it away from you, kind of thing. So it makes more sense to have a smaller population, which is sort of always pushing and pulling in those areas. If you had, a really large population, that would just fluctuate, too much and be too chaotic. So I do get it. Also, the small population does help to keep lag down. So, there aren't too many people in a certain area. Although that can also be beaten by instancing. So I still don't quite get why they went with such small servers. They're causing, a lot of issues. The first week was just horrendous for people to try and get in on the more popular servers. Even my server, which is now it's cooled down a lot, but at the start it was one of the more popular servers, and I was looking at 2 hours plus to get logged in, which is like not fun. Someone who's a casual player and they only have 2 or 3 hours to play in an entire evening, they're not going to get to play. Thankfully, those queues seem to be gone now, but A lot of the servers like mine are flagged as full, quote unquote. So if you have a friend who wants to join you and you're already on such a server, they can't because it's full. It doesn't allow them to make a character on that server. In the future, we're hoping a week or two, people will be allowed to move characters. So if a friend does join on a lower population server that is not flagged as full, one or the other friend can move when they allow for that. Also, speaking of playing with friends, it's not really a very friend-oriented game. I don't know why they designed it like this. Part of that is based on the level aspect. Like if you are level 40 and your friend comes in, they level up a bit, now they're level 20, they want to group with you, there aren't sort of quests that can be shared between players. So that's a big problem right there. And also, since there isn't level scaling, your friend's going to be level 20, you're going to be level 40, you're going to be basically one-shotting everything in his level range. So it's not really the best for grouping. I guess they do expect people to level up pretty quickly. I might be leveling up slower than most, I guess. I am level 35, and I think, like I said, I played about 75 hours. I don't know how long it'll take me to get to 60, let alone 60 with good gear. But if that's more than, I don't know, like 3 or 4 played days time, that's probably going to be too slow for most people. So, people trying to play with their friends, that's going to get pretty frustrating until they're sort of scaled in a level range. Like if one is 50 and one is like 40, maybe 45 for sure, then they could group without any real issues. But, 20 to 30, that's a huge difference and probably will not be the best experience. Also, with such a small server size, finding a guild might actually be difficult. On my server, which again is a fairly popular one, I'm pretty much only seeing the same 6 guild calls in the recruitment channel. So it's like I'm not seeing a whole lot of variety in terms of guilds or places to find a quote unquote home with fellow like-minded players. So that is problematic. And I guess I kind of expected this, but being originally a PvP only based game, adding PvE only in the last year or so, there's a lot of people poop talking about how they're better than other people, about how their faction is better, how their company is the best, and oh, your company sucks because you guys didn't help us in the war. So there's a lot of sort of poop talk in the chat. Some nights I've just had to turn off the faction chat entirely, which you can mute any channel you want. So that's a bonus, I guess. And muting players is not very difficult. But that is a much higher percentage of that than I would like to see. I would much, much, much prefer there be a PvE flagged server where, most of the people on this server don't really care about PvP, or at least they want to play PvE much more. I think that would decrease the poop talking by quite a bit. But overall, I guess those are my sort of mid-level thoughts. As a whole, I would say it's a very great start. At $40 for the base game, $50 for the deluxe, which honestly, the deluxe isn't worth it. It just gets you cosmetic skins and an emote, which you could very easily do without those. I think I would highly recommend it to anyone who thinks they might be interested in the game. But that being said, until the balance on the servers sort of evens out, and until people are free to make characters on any server they want to join their friends, and until there are a few, minor things sort of tweaked, you probably wouldn't miss much. Waiting a few months and coming in a little bit, maybe Thanksgiving to Christmas time would probably be sort of an ideal time to join your friends, or, jump in and try it for yourself. Unless, of course, you are a super competitive player, or you want to get into sweaty PvP, in which case you probably should already be in here, because people that are super competitive are already kind of nearing max level and doing all their super competitive stuff. But if you're like me and you're more all about the PvE side and you don't really care to be competitive because you're in it for the long haul, picking it up in a month or two would probably be just fine. And again, I would recommend it if you think it might be something you might enjoy. There's not really any news I can think of. I don't know of any games coming soon. I think Far Cry 6 just came out. I haven't seen any reviews on it. I know I was going to wait to pick it up because it's on, I think, Uplay exclusively, which I'm like, I don't necessarily mind going to a different service, but that's not one I really use. So it always feels weird to go to that specifically just to play one game. But it being a single-player game, I would just wait until it's half off and then pick it up then. But I think if you're really looking forward to it, that's out now. But really, that's the only thing I can think of in terms of stuff that's coming anytime soon. I guess in general, I'm doing sort of okay. Everything is still terrible because of the virus. I'm pretty much stuck at the library, which is both good and bad. The library people don't seem to mind me. There's a couple of us who are, regulars there. And I look, clean and good. I'm like a normal person, so I don't think it bothers them that I'm there. But it does, feel sad thinking that I'm looking at least January before I'll be able to go back to school, which means, until then, I'm still stuck with ready-to-eat food. There's no microwave. There's no showering. There's no being anywhere super warm because the library, at least until, deep winter, keeps the AC on, so it's like really cold there. But I guess, I don't know, it's not terrible. It is what it is, and I just have to deal with it and try and hang on. Oh, I don't remember if I talked about my jury duty call on the podcast. I know I did on my writings, but I did manage to eke out that, referencing how stressed out I was getting, thinking about being in a tiny room with a bunch of people, because now is not the time to be doing that. So I was getting freaked out by that, and got a dismissal for that reason. So I don't have to do it. I would still kind of maybe not have minded if all of this wasn't going on. It was a murder trial, so it seemed really interesting, although it probably would have been really gross and not something I actually wanted to do, even though it seemed interesting. But anyways, that is cleared up. I don't have to do that, and I don't have to worry about that stress. I guess Halloween might happen before the next podcast, so if it does, happy Halloween. I don't know, October tends to be a bigger month than I always think, so maybe the other podcast will be out before then. Either way, happy Halloween. And I guess I'll see everybody in 3 weeks, and I'll probably, maybe, hopefully, have some higher end thoughts for New World. And I don't know what else I might talk about. But hopefully, I'll see everybody then. Okay, thanks, bye.
You have been listening to Rabbit's Ramblings. If you would like to see the show notes or feed the bunny by sending a donation, you can find the show website at www.rabb1t's.com/podcast/rabbitsramblings.html, When you type Rabbit's Ramblings, don't use a space. If you would like to send me an email, you can do so at rabbit@rabb1t's.com. If you like my page, you can also post on Facebook at rabb1t's.com. You can follow me on YouTube at rabb1t's.com. I have a page on Patreon at www.patreon.com/rabbit, RABB1T. You can set up a monthly recurring subscription there at a price point of your choice. Be sure to put the number 1 in place of I anytime you type rabbit.
Rabbit's Ramblings is copyright Eric Stryker, using a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Derivatives License, 2021.